What's going on? Austin Zabak here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the housing market in particular. Though, is now a good time to buy? And I get asked this question all the time. Austin, should I buy a house right now or should I wait? We're going to cover everything in the video, so make sure you stay tuned to the very end. There's obviously a ton of variables when it comes to the housing market and whether or not now is a good time to buy, but I just want to cover a couple of the basic ones. And one of the big issues right now is that you have big institutional investors like BlackRock, and you even have companies like Opendoor and OfferPad and other various companies that are paying a lot more than market value for single family properties, which is obviously making it really difficult for first-time home buyers to buy a property because they're getting outbid and people are waiving their appraisal contingencies, you're getting beaten by cash offers, and pretty much everything of the sort. And so it makes it really, really difficult for your average person to go buy a property. You have 38% of the home buyers being millennials, and millennials are all having children and they all want to buy a house, okay? So you've got a ton of people bidding on the same properties. But another big problem is you have a huge shortage with new home construction, and we're about 5 million houses short of what we need to have in terms of new construction to keep up with the market. But new home builders are just not building quick enough. The government obviously keeps extending a lot of the forbearance programs and a lot of the moratoriums, so nobody's really selling, which also causes a huge lack of supply on the market in terms of existing homes. So everything really plays together to make really the perfect storm of potentially now not being a good time to buy a house. However, you do have interest rates at an all-time low, which is another big reason that everybody wants to buy right now, because they can take advantage of the very low or historically low interest rates, which some are saying haven't been this low in 50 years. So Fannie Mae conducted a little bit of research, and they said that only 35% of all of the consumers out there believe that now's a good time to actually buy, while the rest of the people believe now's not a good time to buy, and of course, sellers obviously think that now is a great time to sell. Now obviously we have to look at inflation, we have to look at everything over the course of the next 5 or 10 years. And I tell everybody this when I talk to them about real estate. I say, listen, what are your goals? Because again, depending on where you live, depending on where you're looking to buy, depending on how long you're looking to own, and depending on everything of that nature, as it really pertains to why you're buying, will ultimately probably depend or make the biggest difference as it pertains to you buying and whether or not it's actually a good time to buy, okay? So again, we want to look at everything on a macro level, and we want to really look at everything over the course of the next probably 10 years. You know, if you're somebody that, maybe you're thinking about selling in the next couple of years, then now's probably not a good time to buy. But if you're somebody that, maybe you're saying, hey, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to live here for the next, 10 years, then now could theoretically be an okay time to buy. You're getting really good interest rates. If you're moving into a good area that people are moving towards and not out of, and again, really looking at migration patterns and things like that are going to help kind of paint this picture for you of whether or not now will ultimately be a good time to buy for you. So Fannie Mae actually said that only about 35% of consumers believe that now is a good time to buy, while the rest of consumers think that now is not a good time to buy. And also, of course, you have all of the sellers that still think that now is a phenomenal time to sell, okay? So again, there's so many different things that we have to consider, and a lot of people on YouTube are talking about macroeconomics, they're talking about migration, they're talking about the moratoriums and the forbearances. They're really talking about everything as a whole, right? They're looking at interest rates, they're looking at the 10-year treasury, and maybe you're somebody watching the video that you really just want to know, is now a good time to buy for you? And you don't really understand the macroeconomics, you don't understand all of the crazy stuff. And I totally understand that because I work with people all the time that they just want to know that if they buy now, are they going to lose a bunch of money? Are they going to go upside down? Is their mortgage going to get called by the bank? And all of a sudden, they're going to end up in some situation like foreclosure. I think one of the biggest things that you have to look at is now a good time to buy for you? And I think so many people, they focus on the economy, they focus on everything in the world, and they never stop to ask themselves, what is my goal? How long do I plan on owning? wherever I'm buying, are people moving to that area or are they moving out of that area? What are those migration patterns? And can you afford the mortgage? Can you afford the insurance, the landscaping, the maintenance on the house? How stable is your job? And the predictability of the stability of your job, over the next 5 or 10 years. These are the questions that, in my humble opinion, I would ask myself. Because if you can afford to pay the mortgage, you have a good job, you plan on living there for maybe 10 years or more, then whatever happens in the next, 6 months, 12 months, or even 18 months, it really isn't that big of a deal. If the economy were to flatten out and the housing market were to flatten out, it wouldn't really be the end of the world as long as you can afford to pay your mortgage and you don't have to sell should your house temporarily go down in value, okay? So again, you really want to take into consideration your situation, right? And that is the ultimate thing that I tell people to do, is really take a step back and forget about what everybody's talking about on YouTube, right? Don't get me wrong, pay attention, don't be stupid by any means, but if you're really going to live there for a long period of time, then historically, real estate will always trend upward over a long enough period of time, right? Because asset classes are always going to go up. And when we even take a look at inflation and stuff like that, you can factor all of that in as well, obviously. But again, simply put, based on historical data, basically the price of homes will always go up over the long term, right? So you just can't sell when the market temporarily does what it does. Most of the things that I see people talking about on YouTube and all of the articles that I read and everything that I look at typically fall into one of the categories that I have on the whiteboard, okay? The 7 main factors that you kind of see people talking about all the time, right? You hear people talk about the economy on a macro level. You hear people talk about inventory levels, right? Supply and demand. You hear people talk about consumer behavior, consumer spending, things of that nature. You hear people talk about interest rates, obviously, all the time. We hear people talk about investor activity. Okay, we talked about that a little while ago. Also, demographics, right? Migration patterns, stuff like that, okay? And we also hear a lot about government policies. But here's a couple things that I would focus on instead to really determine if now's actually a good time for you to buy. And the number one thing that I would focus on is, do you have an emergency fund? Do you have money put aside that if things were to go south, that you're in the clear? You have a minimum of 6 months, in my opinion, maybe even longer in the current state of the world, okay? I would potentially even consider having up to 12 to 18 months of an emergency fund set aside. The second thing I would make sure is that you have a reliable source of income that, in your opinion, you don't see going anywhere for the next 5 years at a minimum, okay? You have a good job, you have a good employer, the company that you work for is trending upwards, they're not gonna go out of business anytime soon, you're in a good industry and things of that nature. The third thing I would focus on is that you don't have a lot of debt. If you have a lot of credit card debt, or you have a lot of student loan debt, or you have maybe a couple of automobiles, a couple of cars where you have debt and you can't afford to pay it off, that is obviously not a good sign. Another key factor is I would buy a property or start to look for a house in an area that has a lot of people moving into, not people moving out of, okay? You never want to move into an area where over the next 10 years, people are leaving. They're getting the heck out of Dodge, okay? You don't want to do that, right? You want to go somewhere where people are attracted to, people are flocking to, people want to be there. Because over time, jobs are going to come there. Over time, employers are going to come there. All kinds of stuff is going to happen, right? Investor activity is going to be there. People are going to be remodeling. People are going to be there doing stuff. And ultimately, that, over the long haul, will raise the value of that property. So you'll never end up in a situation where 10 years from now, the property is potentially worth less or the same as what you bought it for. The fifth thing is to make sure you can buy something that you can afford. I see so many people buying things they can't afford to impress people they don't even like with money they don't even have, okay? So you want to make sure that you buy something that you can afford. I see people all the time, don't make that mistake, okay? Please don't make that mistake. I would recommend buying something that is well below your means, okay? Something that even if things were to go south, you were to lose your job or whatever the case is, you're not financially strapped and you can actually afford to make the mortgage payment through maybe getting a side hustle or something of that nature. So I tried keeping the video really simple, okay? I tried having a little bit of fun with it. Again, people are obviously gonna comment down below and they're gonna be like, Austin, but you missed this and you missed that and you didn't talk about this and you didn't talk about that. Listen, okay? Unless you want me to make an hour-long video, it's very difficult to talk about everything, okay? So again, these are the main things that I would consider when looking and going to buy a house. Again, I don't think buying is bad right now. I just think that if you can't afford it or you plan on moving anytime soon or whatever the case is, then I would definitely second guess my decision, okay? So again, you wanna make sure that you're smart about it, you wanna make sure you're smart with your money, and you wanna make sure that you make good financial decisions. That's what my channel's all about, by the way. So if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe down below, okay? Also, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and if you've ever looked for deals below market value, I've got a special link for you down below where I find a lot of my off-market deals below market value where you can gain instant equity if you buy the house right. They say that you don't make money when you sell, but you make money when you buy, okay? So definitely go check that out. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.